They said, "Fly out, Grandma. We want you here for Thanksgiving." So I packed my pie dish, my best cardigan, and the folder of papers Greg asked for. I landed smiling, heart wide open. But no one came. Hours later, I saw the family photo. Table full, seats taken, pie served. Without me. So I found a diner, ordered a slice, and took the first bite of the rest of my life. When Greg called, it was a Tuesday morning, just after I'd taken the recycling to the curb and before I started on the apple muffins. His voice had that syrupy cheer it gets when he wants something. "Mom," he said, "we've been thinking. It just wouldn't feel right not having you here for Thanksgiving. The kids miss you. We miss you." It caught me off guard. Not the words themselves, but the softness in them, like he'd actually sat down and thought about me. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, smiling like a fool. "Oh, sweetheart," I said. "I'd love that." He didn't offer to book the flight, of course, but I didn't expect him to. I've still got my Christmas envelope tucked in the kitchen drawer, small bills saved across the year. And this felt like an emergency of the heart, the kind that qualified. "There's just one thing," Greg added, a little too casually. "Could you bring your Medicare card and those insurance papers you keep in the file cabinet? Malene's been helping sort some stuff out. Family trust stuff. Maybe it'll come in handy." It should have raised a flag. But when your son finally remembers to invite you back into the fold, you don't nitpick the fine print. I said, "Of course," and jotted it on the back of my grocery list. I spent the next 2 days packing. Not that I needed much. One carry-on, sensible shoes, my navy wool coat, and the pie dish. The same one I've been using since before Greg was born. It's chipped on one side and still perfect. I wrapped it in towels and tucked it between my sweaters. I also packed the peanut butter cookies Elliot used to love and the cranberry loaf Malene pretended to like. I even rewrote the recipe card for Ruby, thinking maybe this year she'd want to learn. At the airport, I was 2 hours early, because that's how I am. The man at security asked if I had anything liquid, flammable, or mysterious. I told him, "Just my hopes." He didn't laugh, but the older lady behind me did. The flight to Minneapolis was uneventful, just the way I like it. I sat by the window, watching the clouds drag themselves across the sky, and tried not to feel nervous. I hadn't seen them in almost a year. Not since Paul's memorial bench was unveiled. That day had been short, quiet. Greg gave a little speech. Malene brought her gluten-free apple tart and said it tasted just like mine. It didn't. When we landed, I turned on my phone. Nothing. I checked the arrival board. On time. Gate C8. I wheeled my bag to the pickup curb and waited. The wind was sharp, but the sun was out. I kept my coat folded over my arm so it wouldn't wrinkle. People swarmed around me, laughing, hugging, loading luggage into minivans. A toddler ran into her grandfather's arms like they were magnets. I watched for Greg's car. Then I watched for any car. After 20 minutes, I called. Straight to voicemail. I texted. "Just landed. Outside C8. So excited to see you all." I added a heart emoji, even though I hate them. 10 more minutes. A minivan pulled up, but it wasn't theirs. A woman leaned out the window, called someone else's name, and disappeared again. Finally, a message buzzed. Not from Greg, from Malene. "Hey, things are a little hectic. Any chance you can grab a taxi? We're tied up with errands. So sorry." That was it. No punctuation, no apology. I didn't cry. Not then. I found a shuttle that ran out to a comfort inn near their suburb. Cost me $24 and smelled like French fries and old perfume. The driver didn't speak until we got to the hotel. "You here for family?" he asked, glancing in the mirror. I nodded. "Lucky them," he said. I checked in with my own card, the one I never use unless it's something special. The woman at the desk called me ma'am 3 times. I asked for a quiet room. She gave me one that looked out at the parking lot. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the pie dish wrapped in towels. It hadn't even cracked. I thought about texting again. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they were just overwhelmed. I turned on the TV and let it talk to the empty room. Some game show buzzed and clapped. I kicked off my shoes and made myself a cup of tea with the plastic machine in the corner. It tasted like cardboard and artificial lemons. By the time I turned out the light, there was still no follow-up message. No check-in, just the faint buzz of traffic outside and the hum of the heater that clicked every 10 minutes like it had something to prove. I lay there under the polyester blanket, fully clothed, one hand on my suitcase. I had come all this way, and they hadn't even come to the curb. The next morning, I woke up still in yesterday's clothes, my neck sore from sleeping crooked on the motel pillow. The heater had finally given up sometime during the night, leaving the air dry and mean. I shuffled to the mirror, finger-combed my hair into something presentable, and slipped into the navy cardigan I'd laid out on the chair. It still smelled faintly of cedar from my closet back home. I sent another message to Greg. "Good morning, honey. Let me know what time is good for me to come over. I brought the cookies." No response. I made myself a cup of coffee from the lobby pot, burnt but hot, and sat in the breakfast nook with a paper plate of scrambled eggs that tasted mostly of texture. A woman in a Viking sweatshirt sat across from me. We didn't speak, just nodded at each other like survivors on the same raft. She eventually got up and left. I stayed a little longer, checking my phone again. Still nothing. I walked back upstairs slowly, the ache in my hip whispering with each step. Back in my room, I turned on the TV for company and tried not to look at the pie dish still tucked in my suitcase. Around noon, I bundled up and walked 2 blocks to the nearest Walmart. I needed toothpaste, and moving felt better than waiting. The wind had picked up. Real Midwest wind, the kind that stings your ears and makes you squint. Inside Walmart, the lights were too bright, the air too cold. I lingered in the pharmacy aisle, pretending to read labels. As I turned into the checkout line, I noticed a familiar face a few lanes over. Not someone I knew, but someone I'd seen before. At Paul's memorial, I realized. A friend of Maline's, maybe. She was buying a pumpkin-scented candle and a tub of hummus. She spotted me and lit up. "You're Ruby's grandma, right? Maline said you couldn't make it this year, that you had that leg issue again." I stared at her. I opened my mouth, then closed it. "No," I said after a moment. "I made it. I just wasn't expected, apparently." Her face changed, but only slightly. That tight, polite panic people get when they realize they've repeated a lie someone else told them. "Oh, I must have misunderstood," she said quickly. "Well, happy Thanksgiving." I nodded and watched her disappear behind the automatic doors. Outside, the wind hadn't let up. I clutched my little plastic bag with the toothpaste and lip balm like it was proof I still existed. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and finally opened my suitcase. The pie dish was intact. The cookies had crumbled a little, but they were still good. I took one and bit into it slowly, crumbs falling onto the comforter. I checked my folder of documents, Greg's just-in-case request. Medicare card, supplemental insurance copy, the long-term care policy. Everything was there. But something was off. The papers weren't in the order I'd packed them. One envelope was turned the wrong way. I remembered distinctly slipping the card inside the left pocket of the folder, not the right. I never forget those details. I sat very still. The hotel room hummed faintly, the TV babbling in the background. My phone buzzed then. A notification. Not a message. Social media. I opened the app without thinking. And there it was. A photo. Greg, Maline, the kids, at their dining table. Candles, plates, full spread. The turkey carved, Ruby smiling with her braces, Elliot holding a big plastic wishbone. The caption, "Full house, full hearts, happy Thanksgiving." I zoomed in. The pie on the table wasn't mine. Store-bought, perfect crust, whipped topping sprayed high. My chest tightened, not in a dramatic way, just a slow, deep freeze. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. Then I scrolled through the comments. All the usual suspects. Gorgeous family. Wish we could be there. Tell Linda hi. But I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't even in the house. I typed a comment. Short. Calm. Glad you all got together. I'm still at the hotel, if anyone's wondering. I hit post. 2 minutes later, it was gone. No reply. No apology. I turned the phone face down and looked at the ceiling. There was a brownish spot near the vent, shaped like a fish. My throat burned. Not from tears. They didn't come. Just from something older, deeper. A kind of erosion. I picked up the remote, changed the channel to something mindless. A home improvement show where people tore out kitchens that were nicer than anything I'd ever owned. I lay back on the bed, shoes still on, and stared at the popcorn-textured ceiling. Outside, the sun was already dropping. The second night away from home, and I had no idea if anyone even intended to see me. I thought of that woman in Walmart, her puzzled smile, the lie she carried without even knowing, and I thought of the pie. My pie, still tucked in my suitcase, cold and forgotten. Around 6, the ache in my back got too loud to ignore. I couldn't stand the thought of eating another limp apple from the hotel bowl or pouring hot water into a paper cup like it was some form of dinner. So I bundled up again, slid the folder of documents back into my suitcase, zipped it shut with a satisfying tug, and stepped out into the cold. The sky was already a dull navy blue, scattered with bruised clouds. I walked with purpose, no destination in mind, just the need to move. A few blocks down, I spotted a neon sign flickering in the corner of a small strip mall. Cindy's Diner, open late. The windows were fogged, the kind that promised warmth and fried things. It smelled like grilled onions before I even got to the door. Inside, the place was almost empty. Just one booth occupied by an older couple and a waitress leaning against the counter, chewing gum and scrolling her phone. A bell jingled when I came in. She looked up and gave a half smile. Sit anywhere you like, hun. I chose a booth by the window, slid in, and let the heat from the vinyl seat thaw my bones. The menu was laminated and cracked at the corners. I ordered a meatloaf plate, and after a pause, added a slice of pecan pie with whipped cream. Warm it up if you don't mind. The waitress nodded like she approved of the decision. Best part of the day, that pie, she said. As I waited, I stared out at the parking lot. A man was locking up a bike to the railing, tall and lanky, in an old army coat. He came in a few minutes later, stomped the snow off his boots, and made a beeline for the counter. When he saw the booths were mostly empty, he glanced at me and tilted his head. Mind if I share the view? He asked. I gestured to the seat across from me. Free country. He slid in, set his wool cap on the table, and nodded at my plate. That the meatloaf? Smells right. It's decent, I said. Hard to mess up if you know what breadcrumbs are. He laughed, a deep, warm sound that didn't feel forced. Tom, he said, holding out a hand. Widower, retired. Currently on a quest for pie that tastes like something other than chemicals. Marlene, I said, shaking it. Also widowed. Also in search of something better than what's being served. We didn't talk much while we ate, just occasional murmurs. This gravy's too salty. The mashed potatoes are real. When the pie came, it was steaming and glossy, the crust flaking just enough to give me hope. He watched me take a bite. That good? I nodded, surprised by the lump in my throat. It tastes like November, before it all went sideways. He didn't press, just nodded and took his own bite. After a while, I found myself telling him, lightly at first, about the flight, the curb, the hotel, the untouched pie still wrapped in towels. I skipped the hurtful details, but he filled them in with his eyes. Turns out his kids had moved to California and slowly stopped calling once their mother died. He said it without bitterness, like a man reading a fact from a manual. Sometimes, he said, family just gets too busy remembering the version of you they prefer. We sat there, two strangers in the corner of a diner, sharing a pie like a communion wafer. Later, as we paid, he insisted on covering mine. I asked for a to-go box for what was left of the pie. Breakfast, I said, to remind myself the world still got sweetness in it. Tom offered to walk me back, but I declined. I needed the cold, needed the silence between steps. Back in the room, I checked my phone. A new email from Medicare sat in the inbox. Subject line, Notice of Authorized Access Update. I opened it. My stomach turned. There, in tiny clinical font, it confirmed what I hadn't dared to guess. My listed authorized party had changed. New access was granted to Gregory L. Withers, my son. Effective as of yesterday. I hadn't submitted any changes. I sat perfectly still, my breath catching. I'd brought those documents because he asked, because he said they might come in handy. I'd left my bag unattended for less than 20 minutes at the airport restroom. Long enough, I supposed. I closed the laptop, folded my hands, and looked out the dark window. They didn't need me for Thanksgiving. They needed my name, my number, my signature on something I hadn't even seen yet. I reached for the last bite of pie in the foam container and ate it standing up, like it was armor. Then I picked up my phone, opened the camera, and took a photo of the empty dish. I posted it with a single line. I didn't get a seat at the table, but I got the best part anyway. Then I turned off the lamp and slept better than I had in days. I woke up just after 6, the sky outside still navy and blank, as if the world hadn't quite decided to wake up yet. But I had. No hesitation. I made a cup of that terrible hotel room coffee, drank it standing up, and started moving. First, I opened the laptop and printed the Medicare email. Then I took photos of every document I'd brought, every page. I stacked the papers neatly, slid them back into the folder, zipped it into the suitcase, and stared at it for a long time. My son had accessed my records, probably used the info from these very sheets, and I had delivered them like a good little soldier, like a mother who still wanted a seat at the grown-up table. But not today. By 7:30, I was in a Lyft, heading to the nearest branch of my bank. The teller was a young man with shaky hands and a warm voice. I smiled when he asked how he could help. I'd like to close the joint account listed under my name and my son's, I said, and transfer the funds to a new personal account. Just mine. No co-signers, no beneficiaries. We're starting fresh. He blinked. Yes, ma'am. I can help with that. When the process was done, I asked him to print me a cashier's check for part of the balance, just so I could see it in my hands. He did. I folded it carefully, slipped it into my wallet behind a picture of Paul, and left. Next stop, the public library. There, I used their printer to fill out the revocation of power of attorney forms I found on my lawyer's website. Greg had been listed on the old one, an outdated version I'd signed when Paul first got sick. Not anymore. I called Denise, my attorney back in Omaha, and told her I was sending scanned copies that morning and would bring originals as soon as I got home. Her voice was calm and steady, like a nurse during a storm. I've seen this before, she said. They remember they have a mother when the paperwork becomes useful. By mid-morning, I was back at the hotel, suitcase zipped, room tidied. I left a tip on the dresser and took one last look around. It had been a cold place, but it had held me when I needed time to breathe. I whispered a thank you to the lamp, to the heater, to the terrible mattress, and then walked out. The flight home was booked for that evening, but I didn't want to wait that long. I changed it at the counter to an earlier departure, paid the change fee with a satisfying swipe of the new debit card, and settled into a seat at the gate with a hot pretzel and a copy of USA Today. Back in Omaha, the house smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. I changed into flannel pajamas, made a proper cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the familiar grain of the wood. The house was mine again, not just legally, but emotionally. There was no one asking me for checks, no one calling with one more thing. Just quiet. That night, I took down the family photos from the hallway. One by one. Greg's college graduation. Ruby as a baby. The Disney trip I paid for, but wasn't invited to join. I left Paul's photo up. The one from our 20th anniversary where he looked like a man who never raised his voice but always got the last word. The others I wrapped in old pillowcases and placed in a storage bin in the garage. I replaced the frames with other things. A postcard from Arizona Paul once sent me while on a solo road trip. A photo I took at the diner, the one where Tom is half laughing, holding up that ridiculous slice of pie like it's a trophy. A handwritten recipe card in my mother's scrawl, cranberry orange loaf. Serve warm. Serve often. I started volunteering at the library the next week. Nothing fancy. Just shelving, reading to kids once a week, helping other women figure out how to scan old photos or apply for housing. Most of them were like me, tired, kind, sharper than they looked. One Thursday, the director of the library, a spry woman named Janine with silver hair like a storm cloud, asked if I'd consider leading a workshop for other older women. Maybe about writing your story, she said. Your post about Thanksgiving. It made rounds. I think a lot of people are looking for voices like yours. I laughed. What kind of story are they expecting? How to make a pie no one wants? She smiled. Maybe. Or maybe how to survive being invisible and come out louder on the other side. So I said yes. I called it Second Slice, writing our way back to the table. We met on Tuesdays. I brought cookies, someone else brought tea, and we sat in a circle and spoke truths we hadn't dared say out loud in years. And you know what? It felt good. Not vindictive. Not angry. Just real. No one there asked to borrow money. No one told me I was being dramatic. No one pretended to forget I existed. The heater clicked on in the living room, steady and warm. I wrapped myself in a quilt, opened a fresh notebook, and began to write. Not about what I'd lost, but about what I had claimed. The pie wasn't the end. It was the first course. The workshop became my Tuesdays. The library smelled like old paper and pencil shavings, and the women who showed up came in with slumped shoulders and left a little straighter. We weren't fixing the past. We were simply refusing to let it define our future. By the third week, I'd printed up little worksheets titled, Your Truth, Your Way. Janine thought it was empowering. I just liked having something to hand out. We'd talk about memories and lost recipes, first jobs, first betrayals. One woman, Carolyn, 79, shared that her daughter had filed a restraining order after she refused to babysit for the third time in a week. Another, Denise, not my lawyer, told us how her son got a tattoo of his stepmother's name, but forgot her birthday for the fourth year in a row. We didn't cry every time. Sometimes we just laughed until our tea went cold. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening, I got a letter. Not an email, not a voicemail. A real letter. Thick cream envelope, careful handwriting. I recognized it before I even opened it. It was from Ruby. Inside was a single page of notebook paper, torn from a spiral, still showing the little bits of fuzz along the edge. Her handwriting looked just like Greg's when he was her age, looped and slightly rushed. Grandma, Mom said you didn't feel like traveling this year, but I remembered that you always come no matter what. I asked about your pie, and she said she bought one instead. It wasn't the same. I miss you. Can I write to you sometimes? Love, Ruby. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter flat under my hands, and just breathed for a while. No music, no tea. Just the small, impossible weight of hope pressing against my ribs. I wrote back the same night. Dear Ruby, you can write to me any time you like. I didn't skip Thanksgiving. I was nearby. But some people forget that invitations mean more than logistics. Someday we can talk about it. For now, I'll just say this. My pie dish still works, and so does my heart. I miss you too. Love, Grandma. I mailed it the next morning, slipping a photo inside, me and the women from the workshop, holding our second slices like a banner. I circled myself with a Sharpie, just in case her mother pretended not to recognize me. 2 days later, Tom called. I've made a decision, he said without hello. You're either going to think I'm losing it or falling into a Hallmark movie. Or both, I said, setting down my tea. He cleared his throat. I bought an RV, a real one, from 2008. Beige as sin and smells like a high school locker room. But it runs. Got a little kitchen and everything. I'm heading to Arizona for the winter. And I thought, if you wanted, you could come with. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, do you know how to make coffee without a machine? He chuckled. On a campfire if I have to. Then you've got a deal. We left 2 weeks later. I told no one except Janine and Ruby. I packed a small suitcase, left the house in order, gave a key to the neighbor who actually waves when I walk past. I took the pie dish, wrapped this time in an old flannel shirt, and my folder of documents, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't going to let anyone else touch them again. On the morning we left, I taped a note to Greg's front door. I'd driven out there just once, just for this. It read, you wanted access. You had it. You wanted control. You lost it. You wanted the story to be yours. Now it's mine. P.S. The pie was better without you. I never knocked. I never waited. Tom and I hit the highway with the heater rattling and the windows fogging and a playlist from the 70s humming through the dash. We stopped for gas at a little station outside Lincoln and split a buttered biscuit in silence. He drove like he meant it. I sat in the passenger seat like I belonged there. I didn't look back. Not even once. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about it. We crossed into Arizona just after dusk, the sky burning down to embers behind the mountains. The air changed first. Less wet, more weightless. Like the wind had let go of old grudges. Tom pulled the RV into a gravel lot beside a row of saguaro cacti and turned off the engine with a satisfied grunt. Smells like freedom, he said, stretching his arm out the window. Or maybe that's just dust and regret. I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that sits deep in your chest and knocks the old pain loose. We parked the RV in a retirement trailer park called Cielo Ridge, a wide, sun-bleached stretch of land with pastel lawn ornaments and folding chairs with flags printed on the back. Our neighbors were mostly snowbirds, couples with silver hair and matching sneakers, single women in wide-brimmed hats, one man who played saxophone at sunset without warning. I took to mornings quickly, coffee on the little step outside, wrapped in my flannel. I started writing again, really writing. Not just the workshops or my little blog posts. Stories, observations. One piece called Pie at the Wrong Table started to get shared on senior forums and Facebook groups. Women wrote to me, hundreds of them, with stories that felt like mine, only in different colors. One woman from Ohio wrote, I thought I was the only one who sat in a hotel room while my family pretended I was across the country. Another said, your pie story? That was my Christmas turkey. Tom printed out each email and put them in a binder he labeled Second Slice Chronicles. Said it gave him purpose. I told him it gave me revenge, which was almost the same thing. Every Friday, we went to the flea market in town. I started collecting odd salt shakers, tiny ceramic pineapples, cats with missing eyes, a pair shaped like cacti hugging. Tom found me one that looked like a little pie tin. I nearly cried right there in front of a man selling salsa from a folding card table. On a Tuesday afternoon in late March, I heard a knock on the RV door. Not a rap, not a pound. Just a hesitant, uncertain tap, tap, tap. I opened it slowly. There stood Ruby. She wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big, a backpack slung over one shoulder, her hair up in a crooked bun. She looked taller. and scared. "I'm sorry I didn't call," she said quickly. "I didn't want to give Mom time to stop me." My stomach dropped and rose all at once. "How did you find me?" "I read everything," she said. "The blog, the articles. I followed the photo you posted last month. There was a diner sign in the background. Google did the rest." I stepped back without a word and let her in. She sat at the tiny table inside, looked around at the clutter of our traveling life. Books, mugs, salt shakers, half a crossword. She ran her fingers along the edge of the table and said softly, "You were really there." On Thanksgiving, I nodded. At the Comfort Inn off Route 47, I had my pie dish. It never got used. "I believe you," she whispered. Tom, ever discreet, disappeared on a walk for oranges. Ruby and I sat in silence for a while. I poured her water. She took a sip, then set it down and looked up. "Can I stay for a few days? Just until I figure some stuff out?" I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone on the edge of a decision. A girl pulling her thread out of a family pattern before it tightened around her throat. "As long as you brought honesty with you," I said, "you can stay as long as you want." She exhaled, and the shoulders of 3 generations sank a little lower. Later, after dinner, grilled cheese and leftover stew, we sat on the fold-out bed with a notebook between us. I handed her a pen. "What are we writing?" she asked. "Our version," I said. "Of the story, of the family, of what comes next." Outside, the cacti swayed in the wind. The trailer creaked like an old woman settling her bones. And I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not vindication, not even victory. I felt home. Not the house in Omaha, not the Thanksgiving table I never got to sit at. Home was here, on wheels, in words, in truth shared across a cramped RV table over the last bite of pie that, this time, I didn't have to eat alone.